Coming up, the low-density supersonic decelerator deploy?
Well, LightSail deploys.
And the commercial crew program deflates.
All that, plus we're going to be talking about whether NASA should be allowed to crowdfund certain projects. Stay tuned. Tomorrow begins right now. And welcome to Tomorrow for Saturday, June 13th, 2015. My name is Benjamin Higginbotham. This is my beautiful, lovely, wonderful, and talented wife, Carrie Ann Higginbotham, and we'll be your hosts for this episode. I did forget to mention that this is episode 8.18. That is important to know. So the 18th episode of the year for season 8, 8.18.
Is that what that means?
That's what that means, in case you didn't know. Now, before we get started with this week's news and whatnot, I do want to give a huge shout out to all of the patrons of Tomorrow who've helped to make this specific segment of this episode happen. These are the people who have contributed $10 or more to this specific episode, and we are a crowdfunded show. Every single dollar helps, so thank you to everyone on this list to help making this show go. You can find more information over at patreon.com/TMRO. We do love the kids over at Patreon. They're a pretty cool group. Growing like gangbusters over there.
Yeah.
I was just up there this last weekend. It was pretty awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with some space news. I almost wanted to go space news, and I don't know why. Yeah, there's a
Throwback
season,
for you.
Season 4 throwback. Let's start with the Low Density Supersonic Decelerator, or the LDSD. We actually have some footage of the last test flight. This was on Monday, June 8th. For those who don't know, the low-density supersonic decelerator, turn that down, thank you, is basically a next-generation de-acceleration method, or deceleration method, for sending payloads to, like, Mars. And part of the problem of sending a payload to Mars is that there's just enough atmosphere on Mars to be a problem, but not enough to actually, like, stop you. And so you need to be able to slow yourself down and actually deliver large payloads to the surface of Mars efficiently. And the LDSD is kind of like a giant balloon. So it kind of blows up, it kind of expands its surface area to help slow you down, and it's got a hypersonic parachute. And this was fired here on Earth at about 180,000 feet over the Pacific Ocean. Unfortunately, not everything went quite to plan. So this is actually going to plan, right? So they're spinning up the engine. They're giving it some spin to help stabilize it. That's why you see it spinning around. You can see the curvature of the Earth in the background. But then a little bit further on in flight, they deploy the parachute. So, Dada, we've got the parachute deploy video. I hope. There we go. All right, so there's the drogue, and we deploy the parachute. Fully inflate. Yo! That's not good. We basically ripped it apart. That is the second time that has happened. A similar test in June of 2014 also had the parachute shred in deployment. Now, there are more tests scheduled, so, you know, this is not a failure. We bring this up multiple times in the show. It's important to note this wasn't a failure. We got good data. NASA got good data from this test. They recovered. So the capsule came back down and splashed down really hard in the Pacific Ocean because there was no parachute. But they still recovered the capsules. They got some high-speed footage they're going to grab, some high-resolution footage they're going to grab, some additional data that they'll be able to pull off of it. And gathering data and understanding what happened makes it a success. It's an experimental vehicle. It's obviously designed to really work at Mars, so we're testing it here. So we don't count that as a failure. It's a success, actually, in my opinion. It's a success because you get usable data. It would have been a failure if there was no usable data out of the test. So speaking of, there will be additional airborne tests through the Navy's Pacific Fleet Missile Range facility in Hawaii sometime in 2016.
That's
so there
easy
you
enough
go.
to say.
Yeah, I know, no kidding. Speaking of things that kind of went between failure and success, and then failure and success, and like back and forth and on the edge of your seat, LightSail.
I don't know about on the edge of your seat.
On the edge of your seat, nail biting. Oh, it's like a sporting event. Right in the kidneys. That's wrestling. That's not really sport. That's wrestling. That's its own entity. All right.
The sports entertainment, which I guess this is like space
LightSail entertainment.
So we do have LightSail deploy. We have confirmed this.
We have confirmed LightSail deploy.
Yes, and we have communication.
There you go. There's a LightSail deployed. Huzzah.
It's so pretty. And I like it. And this is a picture of just 1/4 of the LightSail itself. I think some of the things we haven't actually ever talked about with this particular LightSail. This is a 340 square foot sail that actually came out of a container about the size of a shoebox. It's 4.5 microns thick, which is, think about your average garbage bag that you might have at home. And it's the third time a solar sail has successfully deployed in space, but it is the largest one coming from a CubeSat. So that, I don't know, that's really cool. I'm happy to see that communications are good. We have complete LightSail deploy. If you are at the correct angle, which I apologize, I did not write the angle down, so I don't know what it is
4.
offhand. Sure, that you should be able, it's big enough that you'll be able to see it in the sky, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
It should be highly reflective too, right? So it should be a big shiny
you saw
object
the picture.
streaking across in the sky. And the reason, we've talked about this before, but the reason this is important is you got CubeSats are kind of stuck in low Earth orbit. They or so they go up so far and then they kind of trickle back down to Earth after a few weeks.
CubeSats are small. This one is let's see, it's a 3-unit or a 3U CubeSat, so it's a 10 by 10 by 30 centimeters or 4 by 4 by 12 inches. So I mean that's not really big
right?
at all.
So you don't generally have engines on these things.
Right,
you don't have a whole lot of stuff on a CubeSat.
And this particular sail is about the size of what Bill Nye says, quote, as the average living room size. So something coming from something this big, right, to be the size of a living room, like that's really important for propulsion and all that other.
Right. So this could enable CubeSats to eventually someday be able to go beyond what they're doing right now. And maybe we could send them to other planets. So we can send these tiny, low-cost devices, what am I trying to say, instrumentation to other planets and actually measure some stuff at a much lower cost than these hundreds of millions of dollars of things that we're sending out there today. But you need propulsion to do it.
Right.
And this could be the propulsion that does it, because you're not going to fit a whole propulsion unit on a CubeSat. That's why this is an important project. So there you go. All right, let's. We've got Space Mike back this week. Let's talk about. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in propulsion for satellites. Talk to us about some hundreds of millions of dollars that may or may not have made it into commercial crew, Mike.
Well, with the different money that's being talked about, the Senate, after the House has already passed their budget spending bill for NASA for next year, the Senate Appropriations Committee has come up with their spending bill for NASA for next year. And one of the biggest cuts to that is hundreds of millions of dollars for the Commercial Crew Program. And what that's doing is, before with the House bill, they were moving around money and funded the same amount of money, or at least proposed to fund the same amount of money that the White House has requested. With the Senate bill, instead of moving money around from different programs, like from Commercial Crew to the Space Launch System, they are just cutting the requested amount of money for the Commercial Crew Program by about $350 million, not 350, I can't talk today. But with all this sort of deals that are going on, there's no shifting of that money to another program. And as of right now, this is still just a spending bill. The president still has veto power for both the House and Senate bills, and this has not gone into law yet. However, they do need to hopefully make a decision soon, because and it's not just for NASA, but lots of other things with the entire budget, the government could possibly shut down in October if they can't decide on the next year's budget. And this year's budget ends on September 30th. So they need to be able to make these decisions, and especially for NASA, to listen to their constituents and make this program be able to happen so that we stop paying the Russians. And something that's kind of interesting is the Senate accused NASA of not being confident in the Commercial Crew Program because NASA has already started looking at booking some Soyuz flights in the 2018 timeframe. And since the Commercial Crew Program is supposed to have their first crewed test flights to the International Space Station in 2017, the Senate looked at that as NASA lacking confidence in the Commercial Crew Program. However, we would still, even if the Commercial Crew Program is fully operational, we would still be using Soyuz flights occasionally, unless we work a deal out with the Russians that they're flying some of their cosmonauts on commercial crew vehicles as well, so that the International Space Station crew rotations don't get messed up. That's kind of been based on the whole Soyuz manifest for a really long time. The shuttle never delivered any International Space Station crew members. They did visit, but they didn't stay. And it's always been the Soyuz that has brought the astronauts and cosmonauts up to the space station. So that is an ongoing deal that hopefully will still continue. But as far as the commercial crew program goes, they need to be able to get that going as soon as they possibly can at the funded levels to have the proposed budget that NASA came out with for over the next couple of years to get commercial crew actually flying. So that's pretty much what's going on with the Senate right now, and things still need to be debated and voted on. It's not into law yet, but it's gonna come close to that soon. We'll find out what the actual budget will be in the coming months.
Yeah, a couple other things to note in there is it's $75 million today per seat for NASA to buy a Russian ticket on a Soyuz. But in addition to that, if the commercial cruise stuff does not get funded at the levels that has been requested, they may end up delaying. There could be a delay past 2017 as well. So you have to add out and go, okay, well, if we're not going to fund it, we're going to, take $300 million out of this, and it delays it for 1 year. That's basically 4 seats on a Soyuz capsule that they have to buy at that point. But your point is also valid that they're going to have to buy it regardless if they want to keep that rotation going as well.
That's right.
So. Go ahead.
But
I interrupted you, so now I made it super awkward for everyone. All right.
In other news, the Mexican Space Agency is looking at sending a payload to the moon. You have more information about that.
Oh my God,
right?
you just tossed it back to me. That was amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Awkward Moments on Tomorrow. All right, so how do I pronounce that? Is it Agencia Espacial Mexicana? AEM.
Yeah, Espacial. Yeah.
All right, cool.
It's the Space Agency of Mexico.
Space Agency of Mexico and Astrobotic, who is a Google Lunar X Prize team, have announced that they're teaming up to send a payload from Mexico to the moon. So the picture we have is Astrobotic's vehicle or a early version of the vehicle that they'll hopefully be sending to the moon. The interesting thing is they have announced that they're going to send a payload from Mexico to the moon. They just don't know what they're sending yet. There's a RFP that was issued in May. It's actually the second request for proposals, an RFP, but it actually hasn't been decided on. That will happen when it's awarded in fall of 2015. And then once the request for proposal is approved, Mexico will actually build whatever this is that they're sending to the moon, send it to Astrobotic, and hopefully have a successful mission to the moon, which will be interesting. It's interesting that the lunar stuff is starting to open up a little bit, right? So you're kind of looking at these Google Lunar X Prize teams and go, there's a business plan maybe there somewhere. I'm not sure what it is. This potentially could be some of that, right? This could be some of that business plan of how do you make money outside of the Google Lunar X Prize, sending robots to the moon. All right, well, sending payloads for countries, sending payloads for people. There's that Ashes in Space. I don't remember the name of that company. Someone will correct me and tell me.
Right.
That might be another option, stuff like that.
Yeah, the ones that we're going to drill down. Is that the one you're talking about? And
No, that's a different one. That's
okay.
a different one. That's a different one.
Yeah, but there's a lot of things like that I
yeah, absolutely. So it's not a whole lot of data to that story, but it's still kind of cool. Also, I did want to go back because we're a real-time show. The chat room did yell at me saying, "Hey, there is propulsion, like little miniature ion drives on some of these things, and hybrid propulsion. Yeah, you can have propulsion on CubeSats, although I'm not sure that most of that propulsion is capable of making it to another planet." Whereas a LightSail, in theory, would be. So I think that's kind of the differentiator. And they may correct me again in 1 minute when it catches up and say, no, you're an idiot. Of course it could. But this is a new, interesting way of doing propulsion. So there you go. So backwards, forward, backward, forward. I forgot about this next story.
Yeah, how are you going to segue into this one?
I have no good segue into this next story. How about just, look at this picture. What do you think? When you see this picture, you're like, wow.
I think, wow, what's with those badges? Those seem really weird. That's my initial thought. So what you are looking at are potentially the first 2 porn stars in space. Right?
Yep, that's a news item on the show. You're welcome, internet.
Not really sure how else to word that.
I like his look. He's so serious. He's like, we're going to do this.
He looks like he's trying out for a movie. And she looks like this thing is heavy and why am I wearing it? That's sort of the vibe. Although, to be fair, he's lit much more dramatically than she is.
Also, they're not wearing that spacesuit. Anyhow, yeah?
Yeah, that's probably why it looks like that. Anyhow, so there's a little company you may or may not have heard of, I'm not judging, called PornHub.
I'm judging.
That is looking into what they have dubbed sexploration. I wish I was making these things up.
Giggle factor.
There is a, it's a Kickstarter program, correct?
No, it's an Indiegogo
It is an
campaign.
Indiegogo, okay. I apologize, the pages look very similar, and that was my problem. I was actually just looking at the details. They have started an Indiegogo campaign to potentially raise $3,400,000. They are 3 days in. They have 944 people as of half an hour ago that have donated money as much as $18,543.
That's as of before we started the show,
Right, it's about
right?
a half an hour ago.
Right, so...
Give or take. And you can donate anywhere between $1 and $150,000. Although there's only 2 of those because you get one of the spacesuits that they actually wear should they manage to go through with
not just the spacesuit, but
this.
Also...
the underwear.
The underwear, yes.
And
you weren't going to bring that up, but I made you.
I wasn't. And if you are interested in a t-shirt, which I'm really sad they're not wearing the t-shirts in this particular video, you have to donate at least $100 to. Anyhow, there is a short clip that we wanted to show you.
It's amazing.
These 2 particular potential sexplorers and their enthusiasm behind is a terrible word. Just roll the thing.
I've had sex pretty much everywhere and every way that you could imagine. I've had sex on almost every different continent with all kinds of different women.
Me too.
Don't get me wrong, I love what I do and who I do, but this is a really unique opportunity to break ground in the adult industry. I'm beyond excited to be a part of the PornHub space program for this exact reason. We're gonna make porn in space.
What?
Who else can say that they were the first porn stars to work in space? This is an amazing
Awkward.
opportunity to make history and to work 2 dream jobs at once. Porn star and astronaut.
Porn star and astronaut. Those
I
are my
mean,
2 dream jobs.
Of all the dream jobs you could have.
Porn star and astronaut.
To be fair, yeah. So we should, for anyone who wants to watch this on demand and
I
go back
figured-
and see just how many cuts it took to get just 4 sentences out of that one dude, please feel free and do so, because he's perfectly still and she can't stay still. And after every 3rd word or so, she suddenly jumps movement because they had to do so many cuts with it. It's impressive. But Ben actually asked me before the show, should we keep this story in the show? And I said yes, because I personally believe that this is about as interesting and
Viable?
and viable isn't the word I want. It's as interesting and as when something like divides people into 2 different camps. You know what I'm saying?
Polarizing?
Polarizing, thank you, as Mars One.
All right.
Because I feel as though a lot of people will be, some people might be offended. Some people think that this is the worst way to talk about space and this isn't what space is for, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it also simultaneously gets a whole other group of people who may or may not have previously thought about exploration and space in general might get them interested and excited.
So I figured because we made the argument that the thing with Mars One is that it could actually get other people excited about space. The same argument can be made here, and it would be kind of hypocritical of me not to include the story. So I would actually say this has a greater chance of
It has a better chance of succeeding.
than Mars One does. That's kind of sad.
Should they be funded, which also can be said about Mars One. And I have to say that the first time that we talked about Mars One, we probably giggled just as much. for different reasons, but probably just as much. So there you go. If you would like to give money, please feel free. Again, I am a little sad that it takes $100 to get a stupid T-shirt, but there are a couple other things.
Would you wear a PornHub T-shirt around?
It doesn't say PornHub on it.
What's it say?
Well, I mean, it does, like, but in tiny writing.
PornHub space program?
Their logo, yeah, it's kind of cute.
Okay. Awkward again. Oh, go ahead. Mike is raising his hand. Yeah.
I wonder if after they complete this, if they get their badge that they're now in the 250-mile high club. But also, on a serious note, I wonder what they're going to do with $300 million. I mean, it's $3 million because it's just $3 million because, you know, even if they had to rent, let's say if they did this on Spaceship Two, if they had to rent out the entire passenger cabin, that's only $1.5 million. And to hitch a ride on a Soyuz to go up to the space station is a lot more expensive than $3 million. So I'm wondering what they're going to do with that money.
They actually break it down on their website. I thought the same thing. They actually break it down. And they do bring up valid points, which is they have to fly crew too, right? They say they have to fly special cameras. Bullshit. So I'm not sure.
Cameraman.
Yeah.
Hey, you don't know what kind of cameras porn stars use typically.
Don't I?
So maybe those are special.
So
cameras.
no, they don't need any special gear. So I think it really comes down to booking an entire orbital flight. The problem is, who are they going to go with, right? Will Virgin Galactic really let them do that?
I think, first of all, just because of the name Virgin would be hilarious. But I can't see currently anyone who, with the capability in the next couple of years, wanting to support such a thing.
We are spending way too much time on this news item. Let's move along.
It could be the main topic. But
at this point, it could have been the main topic. All right, let's go ahead. Maybe I'll just make it the main topic. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the final news item. How do I segue out of porn?
Because you watch a lot when you get dumped?
Oh.
No.
Mike, do a good segue for me here. Go, Mike.
So, Stratolaunch, the company that is by Paul Allen's Vulcan Aerospace, they previously, with the whole thing, it's two Boeing 747s with one wingspan, and they're going to be dropping a rocket from underneath it. Originally, they were going to be going with SpaceX as that rocket that they would be dropping and launching payloads into space from. Then they went to Orbital ATKs, a version of their Antares rocket, but as reported recently by the Seattle Times, the Vulcan Aerospace has decided to drop the Antares as their rocket of choice due to monetary reasons. With all the different problems with Russia and the Antares getting its main engines from Russia and those engines not being produced anymore, and there's only a limited supply of them anyway, lots of different factors go into why the price of the Antares rocket, also all the modifications that would need to be made to that rocket in order to be air-launched from this particular mothership plane, would just become too expensive. And so they're looking, one of the higher-ups of Vulcan Aerospace has said that they're looking at 70 different possible rockets as a replacement for that. But as of right now, they are putting their major focus into completing the first Stratolaunch launcher. And in the picture that you can see here, this is the most recent public picture that they had uploaded of the progress so far of that. And so they're hoping to have the first test flight of that giant airplane later this year. But if they run into any more engineering problems or just any other unforeseen problems at all, that may or may not be delayed a bit. But in any case, they're going to need to do lots of flight testing with the Stratolaunch air launcher, similar like they did with the White Knight 2, before getting to the rocket that would be launched from that. So interesting updates, and I'll be curious to see who Stratolaunch picks as the replacement for Orbital ATK. And that's it for space news.
All right, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I'm not sure what our main topic is going to be. It could be more space porn, or it could be that asking the question, should NASA be allowed to crowdfund individual programs, ? So stay tuned. We'll find out what our main topic will be right after this.
Look into her face, determination in her eyes.
I love that song. That's one of the few. Once we found that, it made that go for the launch calendar. We haven't changed it since. We've tweaked the calendar slightly, but that song has stayed the same. That's one of my favorites. All right, before we get started with our main topic, I did want to give a huge shout out to all of the patrons of tomorrow who have helped to make this specific segment of this episode happen. These are the people who've contributed $5 or more to this specific segment. If you'd like to find out how you can get your name in the show, get early access to After Dark, get some Google Hangouts, some other cool stuff, and of course, help us to continue to produce, I would say these fine shows, but I'm just going to say these shows. You can head over to patreon.com/TMRO. The really cool thing about Patreon is you get to set whatever limit you want, whatever value you think you can't do negative numbers, whatever value you think this show is worth.
I guess you could. You can get like pledge money, but then say like never.
Give me money back.
Yeah.
Whatever you think the show is worth per episode, you can say, okay, I think it's worth $1 or $2 or whatever it is. $10, $20, $100. You can make up a number, and at certain levels, we have rewards that we'll give back to you as a thank you for helping us to produce the show. And you'll automatically be billed at the end of the month. But as the end of the month comes, if you go, ooh, I can't afford that. You can actually, before you get billed, you can cancel that or lower it or do whatever you need. So it's very much so in your favor. In addition, you can set monthly caps. So let's say you contribute $5 per episode, but you want to say, okay, but no more than $20 per month. You can do that as well. So a lot of really cool things you can do. Again, head over to patreon.com/TMRO. All right, let's go ahead and get into our main topic of, should NASA be allowed to crowdfund individual programs? It's important to note that I believe this is actually illegal right now. NASA could not go out and say start a Kickstarter campaign for something because they are funded by us, the U.S. taxpayer. So we're going to pretend for a moment that a bill is up that would allow NASA to go out and create their own Kickstarter campaign, Patreon campaign, Indiegogo campaign, whatever it is. Should they go that route? I think that's kind of the question for this one. I'm going to spar with Mike if I can for a little bit because this was actually his topic idea. So Mike, we'll start with you. So Mike, what's your opinion? Should NASA be allowed to crowdfund individual programs?
In my perfect world, I think they should. That would be awesome. And here is a couple of reasons why I think they should. Let's say a program is really cool and really interesting, but they're running into time delays, they're running into budget delays, they're having engineering problems, and they're having to do more tests, or something blew up, or things happen. There are lots of reasons why people in the space industry can have a bad day. And with NASA, they wanted to have a follow-up to the space shuttle. There were lots of different ideas and versions, some of them that got quite far along in development. And not just with that replacement, but with lots of different interesting research and development projects that NASA has done over the past 20, 30 years have been really cool and really interesting. And the kind of trend seems to be that they get right around 95% completion and then are canceled because of all the budget overruns, it being way behind schedule, all those sort of things. So if a program is in that particular situation, and the program managers want to keep that program alive and see it through to the end, they should be allowed to go and raise the money themselves for whatever they need to complete the project. A good example for me was the X-33 program. They canceled that program because the fuel tanks on that just they were going to be too heavy, and they were going to be testing these really cool new composite tanks, which is something that is done a lot more now. But at the time, they were this close to doing that test before it was canceled by Congress. And if they had just had a little bit more time and a little bit more money, literally a matter of months to be able to do that test and show that, yes, it worked. And they did do the test eventually anyway, but the program had already been canceled. I think that different individual programs, it should be up to individual programs, not NASA as a whole, because then we have the whole problem of, okay, where does this money go? What's fair? And then we have to get the lawmakers back involved on where all that money should go. And I'm not saying that if an individual program raised a bunch of money for it, there shouldn't be any, oversight or responsibility for where they're spending that money. That shouldn't be going to, pay extra bonuses to the program managers and the engineers involved, but to actually get that program to completion. And that would all be, very well spelled out in those different sort of crowdfunding campaigns to explain, here's what we need, here's why, and if we get to this level, then this is what we can do. Oh, and by the way, if we get more money, then we can put all these extra cool science experiments on a CubeSat or a probe to Mars or any of the other planets. There are so many different possibilities of that. And even though, yes, it is illegal, I think that under certain conditions, like, you know, a program being in trouble, NASA and that individual office for particular missions and programs should be able to crowdfund to get the rest of the money they need. And I think that that would be a really cool solution to see a lot of really cool ideas that get scrapped actually happen and materialize and just snowball from there.
Here's the thing, though.
That's what I think, anyway.
Against your point, though, so if you've got a vehicle that's 95% of the way to completion, it's not NASA generally building this vehicle. It's a contractor. It's Boeing, it's Lockheed, it's Orbital, it's someone else. And they have been given generally hundreds of millions of dollars to get this vehicle to where it's at right now. And if they got it 95% of the way there, as for instance, and they're just, you know, 1 or 2 more tests away, why does that company not just go, look, we've got coffers of money, we'll go ahead and we'll fund this vehicle moving forward? Why can't they take ownership of that and actually say, you know, why do we have to crowdfund it at all? The company already got hundreds of millions of dollars. If they, I mean, they have the plans, they have the everything, they could do it too. Why can't they do that?
Good question.
All right, well, there's that part. The other part of that is, thanks. The other thing is, you open this up for NASA, you have to open it up for everyone. So imagine the NSA crowdfunding their next spy program. I know, right? But
give us money so we can spy on you more.
Yeah,
Sure, but I mean, the nice thing about that is that it's a little bit more fair. So, people in the chat room are commenting saying, well, you know, aren't taxpayers the ultimate crowdfunded, or, you know, aren't they already
forced crowdfunding?
Right. I mean, you know, it is already a crowdsourced, you know, program to a certain extent because of that, at least money wise. But yeah, I don't want to fund the NSA's next spy project, right? So then I don't give money to them. That's the way that would work then. If you open it up like that, then that's the way that would go. Is it not?
Well, maybe.
And then it's on the part of, just like Kickstarter, just like Indiegogo, it's on the responsibility of the person who's trying to get the money, or the project that's trying to get the money, to make it interesting enough for people to want to source it.
I don't think it's viable to crowdfund a space program.
I didn't say it was viable.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like NASA's space programs, these things are billions of dollars. How much has the SLS run us thus far, right? I mean, it's billions with a B of dollars. The largest Kickstarter campaigns are what? Tens of millions, maybe? Most Kickstarter campaigns are thousands of dollars. There's
and none of them are trying to go to Pluto.
Yes, but I don't think that there's enough people willing to give additional money on top of their taxes, mind you, to NASA.
So, all right, so what if you changed it a little bit, right? You and I have talked about this a number of times, and probably a little bit on the show even. You are going to be taxed, period.
Yes.
Right? Your tax is whatever your tax is. However,
50% of your income.
However, you now
California.
get to choose where it goes, right? With a certain amount has to go to like your state or your local government or your local whatever. I mean, because there's
you get to divvy it up to the different programs.
Sure, but you
awesome.
Exactly, right? Or, you know, these are all the different programs, or these are all the different areas, but, you know, you get to choose your percentage with nothing being less than 1%.
Yeah, so actually, I've always thought that would be an interesting idea,
Right?
where you actually get to choose where your money's going. So you instead
in
of
that way,
instead of politicians deciding, you personally decide. Look,
It's
I'm interested in
crowdfunded then.
NASA, so I'm going to give. You have to give. I've been thinking about that. You would have to give, say, 30% of it is given to core infrastructure. You don't get to choose.
Sure.
Core infrastructure being military, blah blah blah, whatever. Maybe
Right.
it's even 50%. I don't know what that number is, but. We'll call it 50%. 50% goes to core infrastructure.
Right, bridges, schools, kind of important.
Transportation, military,
That's
industrial
just
unit,
gonna go-
blah,
sure.
blah, blah, right? No, actually, I wouldn't put schools in that. I wouldn't, actually.
Okay.
The other 50% goes into non-essential things, because schools, I don't have children, why am I paying for schools?
Okay, all right.
Or I have a child in private school, why am I paying for public school?
Sure,
well,
sure.
I say that, but all ships rise with the tide. You want to have an educated populace.
Yes.
So, all right, we're going to skip school because I'm not actually sure that's correct. But other things, libraries, space program, Stuff like that, right? You choose where the money's going to go. You get to divvy it up, and I can say, okay, NASA's getting a good chunk of the money. But that could backfire greatly, too.
Because?
People could choose not to fund NASA. They could actually lose a lot of money, not get money.
Sure.
Because there are a lot of people who don't even know that NASA still does anything now that they retired the space shuttle.
Sure.
Go ahead, Mike.
I think, though, that would kind of be true democracy, though. I mean, if the entire people are choosing where their tax dollars go, then what the people actually want to happen would be what would happen. And if you were a regular person who thought that NASA didn't exist anymore, and you see on, your tax divvy up form, where you want your money to go, you see that there's an option to give money to NASA, a lot of people are going to be like, heck yeah, especially if it would probably also get crazy because every single government agency would suddenly become like media and advertisements hounds. And so they would all kind of be, fighting, competition for everybody's dollars, vote for us, donate to us, and do all sort of that. So it could get really crazy, but at the same time, it would also it would force people, in a sense, to at least have a general idea of what's going on, so that when they look at their forms, maybe not everybody does this, but like for me, when I go and vote, or at least ahead of time, and I get the forms ahead of time, and just like, okay, I don't know who any of these judges are, I don't know who any of these representatives are, and we'll at least spend a whole hour's worth of looking up some of these people, to get an idea of what they're about. Not everyone, and that's for me my laziness of being politically involved and politically informed, for when I go for my local voting. But if everyone has to do this to decide where your tax dollar is going to go, they just might do a little bit of lazy research into finding out what some of these things are, and the people would actually, for me, that would be true democracy. That would be awesome.
Kind of. Citizen 72 has a good point that says there was a reason the founders chose a representative Republican form of government. They weren't wrong. Look at the dumb nonsense that gets funded on Kickstarter. Look at the weird things. So let's get back to the idea of kickstarting something. In theory, on paper, then, if NASA were able to kickstart something, or Indigo or whatever. I'm using Kickstarter as kind of by saying Kleenex, right? You crowdfund. There we go. So if NASA were to crowdfund something, anyone should be able to crowdfund something at those same levels. Now, I said NASA's programs cost billions. Chris Radcliffe earlier said not all NASA programs, are billions. But the cool, interesting stuff I think that we're talking about is very expensive. Planetary sciences was underfunded.
Right.
Does anyone have the budgetary? It was a couple $100 million, wasn't it?
For this most recent one, it was, according to spacenews.com, about $280 million.
We're going to round that to $300 million. So let's say we wanted to re-crowdfund planetary sciences and bring it back up to snuff.
Right.
$300 million. We're orders of magnitude off from what crowdfunding has been capable of doing today. Now, maybe it takes something like planetary sciences to get crowdfunding up to that level. Yes, Carrie Ann?
Are things like Kickstarter and Indiegogo relegated to just inside the U.S.?
No. And actually, all right, so let's say you wanted to create a crowdfunded campaign for an Australian space program. Well,
Right, but my point is that if NASA was allowed to crowdfund something, does that open it up to countries outside of the U.S. in order to give money to it?
Yeah, so we have to...
Right?
Yeah, right, so that could get tricky.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a whole nother legal...
That's a whole ball of wax that we're just going to... that's...
Because my point is...
Remembering, it is technically illegal for them to do this right now. So.
Right, but you keep saying that, like, the biggest Kickstarter programs have only been X amount of dollars, and that's...
That's still worldwide.
Is that...
Yeah, those are worldwide campaigns.
That's the question. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, so, there you go. So I'm just not sure that it will have the oomph necessary to actually make a usable difference in NASA. And then what could happen is, so the Congress would actually say, hey, look, well, NASA, you're now eligible for kickstarting campaigns. That's your primary budget. Ready, go. We're going to pull the $20 billion or so that we give you every year. You have to make it up in crowdfunding stuff. And we could end up completely destroying NASA by moving to a crowdfunding campaign as opposed to just giving them the money out of the taxes.
What if they still got their annual budget that Congress decided on, and like I was kind of saying earlier, only under certain conditions would individual programs be allowed to go crowdfund for their program, like if it was over budget or
You mean when it's over budget? When it's over budget. You know, but doesn't that incentivize the companies then to make their programs over budget because they'll know that they'll get the money in the back end through the Kickstarter campaign?
Maybe if their Kickstarter campaign is successful.
Yeah, but then they can just squeeze the government for whatever funds they want, which actually goes back to cost plus contracting as well, right? So everyone's hating on cost plus contracting, but when you look at experimental vehicles, we have no idea how much these things are going to cost. So why are we telling Boeing or Lockheed, you know, that's going to be $100 million when we don't know that it's going to be $100 million? It's going to be maybe it's $200 million, maybe it's $1 billion, maybe it's half of that. We have no idea. That's where cost plus contracting actually comes into play, and for experimental vehicles, it actually does make sense. So that's kind of an aside for there's that little thing. And that is gonna create a slew of hatred comments on the YouTube channel. Send your hatred to Mike.
Sad.
YouTube.com/OTMcHale.
So any final comments, Space Mike?
Kind of the final comment is that I think that this possibly could be viable for small stuff, like research and development ideas, like TransHab, for example, the technology that Bigelow Aerospace bought to make these inflatable space stations. That started off as a NASA research and development project, and that probably could have gotten funded all the way, and part of NASA's arsenal right now, if they'd only gotten, you know, $1 or $2 million at the time, not hundred millions, but just $1 million at the time when it was up for being canceled. And that wasn't something that was out to a subcontractor. That was something in-house that NASA was doing. There's lots of ideas with that, with their whole research and development side, which is probably the most underfunded part of NASA right now. So that's my final comments on this.
All right, you? Any final comments? Or from the chat room?
No.
All right. I think it opens a potential can of worms that it was kind of a moot point. It's a fun debate, but they can't do it. I think it opens a ton of potential can of worms from funding and from a political standpoint, and that it's just not going to generate the dollars necessary for the really big inspirational missions that people look at from NASA, and then people start kind of asking what's going on here. Crowdfunding certainly has its place. I'm not sure this is it. If it would work for NASA, it should work for anything then, right? So if there is a crowdfunding campaign that wants to start a space program, in theory, you should be able to crowdfund that, and I just don't think it would be a successful program today on Kickstarter. All right, that's our debate. We'd love to know what you think in our comments. Leave them on YouTube, on the Twitterverse. I'm pointing to random things. This means Twitter. This means YouTube. What else have we got? We've got our website over here. Hi, Mike. Here you go.
Don't forget the Reddit over there.
Reddit, yeah, Reddit's right over here. Reddit's right up over there. So, yeah, leave your comment wherever you'd like. And speaking of comments, we're going to bring up our comments from last week's show after we take this quick commercial break. And welcome back to Tomorrow. Now, before we get into viewer comments from last week's show, I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of the patrons of Tomorrow to help to make this specific segment of this episode happen. These are the Patreon Plus subscribers. These are people who've contributed $2.50 or more to this specific segment. Now, in addition to getting your name in the show, which is awesome, you also get access to After Dark as soon as it is available. Other people have to wait somewhere 4 weeks or longer whenever I feel like releasing the After Dark episodes on our After Dark channel. And you also get your Google Hangouts and a couple of other cool things. But there are even more people who've contributed to the show. These are our Patreon subscribers. These are people who've contributed between 1 penny and $2.49. So even 1 penny, or about 4 cents per month gets your name in the show. How awesome is that? You can learn more on how you can help crowdfund the show over at patreon.com/TMRO. Interesting that I'm railing against NASA being crowdfunded when we are almost completely crowdfunded. We get a little bit of ad revenue, but it dwarfs in comparison to the crowdfunding of the show. All right, let's go ahead and get started with some comments from last week's show. Carrie-Ann! Oh my God, that's long.
Yeah. This one comes from Boston Collider.
This is why I like Twitter. Forces you into 140 characters.
In my humble opinion, a 100-ton plus launcher is the wrong way to do things, because even if you have a rocket that large, you won't have any payloads that large that are delivered in a single piece, unless they happen to be something that you can build at the launch site. At some point, the launch vehicle stops being the bottleneck and Earth-side transportation dictates the size of your payloads.
Kind of. Today, right? I mean, yeah, you kind of have to do some assembly at the launch site, but still, Earth assembly is still easier than space assembly today. And, you know, we can't do larger stuff right now because there isn't a vehicle that lets you do it. So when you have a vehicle that's an enabler that allows you to do these bigger, cooler missions, it opens up a whole new door. Imagine for a moment being able to launch the James Webb Space Telescope fully unfurled.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you don't have to unfold the mirrors.
Yeah,
you don't have to unfold.
amazing.
It just goes up as one giant, ready-to-go piece and just gets dropped off in space. Right? That should be what we're kind of trying to move towards. Actually, I think Sea Dragon would enable that. Yeah. So, yes. Now, it's not a weight thing. I mean, it is a weight thing, too, but it's also a size thing. SLS is bigger. I don't know that... I'm saying I used James Webb Space Telescope as an example. It was a terrible example. Actually, I have no idea if that would work on SLS. But imagine for a moment we get to those vehicles that are big enough where you can do things like that. Imagine where you're not just dropping off James Webb Space Telescope, but you're also dropping off a HAB unit, a refueling unit, and something else. Right? There are some really cool things you can do when you make bigger, badder boosters. All right, moving along.
Nice. This one comes from Nick Newell, also on YouTube. Why do we say paper rocket like it's a bad thing? All rockets start out as paper rockets. It's unfortunate that many of the most interesting and innovative designs never make it past the paper stage. I bet you were pretty excited about the Falcon Heavy paper rocket when it was announced in 2011 with Elon's promised first launch in 2013.
Yeah, so, but you answered your own question, which is, why don't we like paper rockets? Because most paper rockets aren't built. Or if they are built, they only start construction and then they get canceled. The problem with paper rockets is they're on paper only. They're only theory. Or they're not even theory sometimes. They're just kind of like a thing. And that's the problem. Obviously, everything starts on paper, so it's not that's the bad part. It's the talking about something that isn't real yet. And by the way, Falcon Heavy does kind of go into that classification right now. We'll be a lot more excited about it when it actually does start to fly.
Yeah.
Same thing with SLS. I think people will be a lot more excited about SLS once it starts to fly. But right now, it's a mostly paper rocket. And that's why it's a bad thing.
All right.
I don't think it's a... Bad thing's not the right word, but skeptical thing.
There
right?
you go.
Right? Skeptical thing. Right. There you go.
I think
Moving
that's fair.
right along.
From Stephen Thompson, also on YouTube.
Oh,
The people interested in
Twitter
Mars
people, Twitter.
are already excited. Sorry, but I doubt there's any average person on the street who will be inspired by, with the SLS or Space Launch System, we'll be able to send people to Mars in 10 years. Provided Congress supplies the necessary funding. In my opinion, the SLS will be a better jobs program than an inspiration program.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. The thing with the Space Launch System is once it starts flying, that's our generation's Apollo.
Sure.
Right? I mean, that thing's going to be big. It's going to be massive. It's going to be capable of sending humans back to the moon.
He makes a good point, though.
Yeah, I mean... The people who are saying that the people who are already inspired about going to Mars are already inspired. I'm not sure that's entirely true, though. Right? Is that the point you were referring to?
No, I mean, yes, the whole thing. It's hard for me to argue against that. It just is. It's like anything. It's you know what? It's akin to me. Things like I didn't read the Game of Thrones book series.
Sure.
Right. I know it's not called Game of Thrones. I apologize.
Fire and Ice.
There you go. I haven't read the Fire and Ice book series, right? So when I heard about this show called Game of Thrones, and it's like medievalish, kind of, sort of, but like, with some dragons and stuff, I wasn't really excited about it.
But you started watching it.
But I started watching it.
Right.
So it really wasn't until I saw what we were talking about, right, that I was interested.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess we're interpreting the comment differently. I'm reading the comment as people will not be inspired by SLS. It'll always ever just be a jobs program. Whereas I'm saying I think if it's built and flies, it will be inspiring, because it's like your point of, until you watch the television show, you're like, then you saw it and you're like, that's amazing.
It doesn't sound interesting to me. I don't really care.
Then you saw it and you're like, oh, that's amazing, right? Actually, that's a very good parallel to space in general, right? I think a lot of people don't care about space, but if you drag them out and set them down in front of a rocket launch and say, watch that, they'll care real fast. Right? Because you just watch that thing ascend and you feel it on your chest and you're like, that is amazing. I want to know more about that amazing thing that is defying gravity in front of me. Oh my gosh. Right? That, if we could find a way to get people down to the launch sites to watch it and like experience a launch, I think we could get a lot more space converts, a lot more people excited and passionate about space.
I just had a really terrible thought.
Okay.
I think that makes us space hipsters.
Oh, I don't like that. Let's move on. I mean, I'm a regular hipster, apparently. I've turned into a hipster. She did it to me.
I liked space before it was cool. This next one comes from Chris Marshall.
That's better. That's better. Thank you, Chris.
Also on YouTube. Ben, is the iTunes posting something someone else can help out with? I would be happy to volunteer some time each week to helping post the different media sites if that would help the process.
This is in relation to the space pods not showing
process.
up.
I don't know
process.
if
Could
Chris could be Canadian. I don't know.
We don't know. So this is a reference to the space pods not showing up on the iTunes channel or the Roku channel right now. That's because they're not being posted to our website because I've been traveling, so I haven't had a chance to do that. Yes, we can always use more people to help out. I have more than just those, right? So someone needs to actually, it's kind of a horrible process because the space pods are kind of uploaded separately. We don't encode them. You actually then have to download them again from YouTube as two separate things, then upload those to our Amazon AWS account, and then link that. You have to create a web page post, like a WordPress post on our website, fill out all the information, and then link that stuff with a fairly specific format. Post that, and then we'll actually automate some of that. Then we also need people to do some social media stuff for us, because I've been kind of slacking on the social media side. So if any of that sounds interesting, or you've got a little bit of free time, maybe you don't want to help with the Patreon thing, but you really want to help the show succeed, yeah, absolutely. We could definitely use help. Benjamin at TMRO.tv. Let me know what you're interested in, the social media side, helping to post stuff on our Amazon side, whatever. We've also got something called Launch Library that's near completion. Launch Library is a database of upcoming launches, and hopefully we'll go back and add previous launches too, that developers can query. It's an open source API. For those of you who try to find the scheduled launches, you probably go to Spaceflight Now and their launch schedule. It's like that, but something that you can build an Android app for, a web app for. You can build a Roku. Actually, our Roku app is driven by Launch Library. There are actually already a few application developers that are using it and querying against Launch Library. But what we need is we need help. We need people who can go in and keep that launch database as up-to-date and accurate as fast as possible. So if you're interested in helping out with Launch Library, social media, or posting the site stuff, Benjamin at TMRO.tv. Until then, I will do it myself as much as I can, but that might mean that sometimes things slide through the cracks, and I'm sorry, that sucks, but that's how it's going to go. So there you go. Next up.
This one comes from, I believe it's Niosis?
Niosis.
Sure. From YouTube, it's funny how Ben is taking the pro SLS side when I'm pretty sure he has said that he thinks it will never actually launch a while back. I could be wrong on that quote, though.
So, as a reminder, I believe people are allowed to change their opinions. And all right?
Sorry.
She's all choked up. The thing worth noting is that a while back, I didn't think it would ever I didn't actually think it would ever be built at all. I didn't think it'd get it out of paper rocket stage. As it progressed along, I did change my opinion. And I actually do have a bet with Dave Maston saying that I think it will launch. And he doesn't think it will ever launch. I think that the engines will fire, commit it to flight. Now, whether it gets off the pad or anything else, that's up in the air. I think they've actually engineered it quite well. I think it will actually launch. But I think it will launch. My bet with Dave Maston is it will launch, and that has been a long-standing bet for, I think, about a year now or so. So that's kind of been where we're at. All right, and finally, this last comment comes from U5KO on Twitter. There we go, we actually have a Twitter account. Look at how much nicer that is. On U5KO, he says, Ben, I still want that Europa Ganymede answer. This is going back to which mission would be cooler. And you're going to hate my answer. I don't know if I've actually answered this for you at all, but the actual answer is when I'm given a choice, I always choose both things. You can say, no, you have to choose one or the other because we're doing missions to both. The answer is no. I do not have to choose one or the other. I choose them both because both will bring back useful science. Both will be awesome missions. We want to go to both of them. We shouldn't choose one or the other. In fact, we should be doing more than just those two. We should be doing as much stuff as humanly possible. So my answer, and I didn't want to corrupt everyone and actually give up my answer because then everyone would be like, yeah, actually we should do both. My answer is both. We should do both. There you go. Europa. All right. On that note, let's go ahead and end up. And you just came back. You could have.
I know.
I could have finished the show. It would have been great.
Couldn't have happened.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry.
All right. So we'll go ahead and close out the show. I'd like to thank everyone so much for watching. After Dark is up next. For those of you who are patrons at the $2.50 level, Patreon Plus subscriber or above, you'll have instant access to After Dark as soon as it's available. For everyone else, it'll be available in 4 weeks or so. And I'd like to thank everyone so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.